Welcome back, everybody, to Be the Trader. Today, I have a very special guest, a return guest. He was on a previous episode that's already aired, so make sure you go and look at that episode to get his background. Krishna, head trader from Florida with 7 Points Capital. Krishna, welcome back, my man. How you doing?
Thanks, Alex. Pleasure to be here again. Thanks for having me on the show for the second time. And thanks for all the support. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, man. So I appreciate you being on this new segment we have where we kind of share a specific trade, either a win or a loss, and the lessons we've learned from it. I think this is going to be a great segment, and I appreciate you being part of it. So let's get this started. This is Works for everyone who's listening on April 13th. So if you want to look on your own time on Thinkorswim or whatever it may be, you can definitely check it out there. But take it away, Krishna.
All right. So the ticker or the main trade for the day, April 13th, was Works. The company's SC Works. I've traded a lot in the past. I usually feel much more comfortable going back to the same name because you have like a little bit of a history. You know how crazy the stock can be. But I did know one thing about this one was in the past, this is one of the favorite pumps for some of the chat rooms. So what they usually like to do is just squeeze it up in the morning. Well, part of the reason is also because the float is about 5.5, 6 million, total outstanding shares close to 7 or 8. So, well, the company is coming from, the stock is trading at like close to $2 on the daily, and now just caps up at 5 and 6 the next day. So we already had like a big move in terms of a pre-market gap. The news was significant in terms of the sales numbers for the company. But apart from that, I felt like they'll be buying 2 million test kits over 24 weeks, which is like over the next 24 weeks. That's going to be a crazy amount of time, like over the next 6 months or so. By the time, there won't be any need for 2 million such kits. So that was the whole thesis behind it, that try to stay out of trouble in the morning, because the pumps and the news pumps and the chat rooms usually like to trade it on the long side, given the history that I have with the stock. So the idea was stay out of trouble on the long, don't short the front side pretty quick, look for any long setups, if any. Otherwise, completely try to keep the losses fairly minimum. And once I started getting a feel for the stock, where I felt the stock is getting distributed, not really breaking out, and like wedging and breaking out as it was in the first 3-4 hours, that is when I put on the biggest trade that I had, which was gradually around 145 and 215, as Alex is pointing out on the chart for me. So that was the time where I had the biggest position. The good thing about this was I felt much more comfortable because I had been trading it all day. Before we focus on the major trade, which was between 1:30 and 2:30, I'll just quickly go through the execution from the morning. What I was trying to do was, straight as we opened, I got like a short around close to 650, where I had a level in mind, which was the open, which was like 750 stop. Just put on a feeler position. Let's see how it looks. As the trade started working progressively, I started adding 1/3 of the existing position at a time and started adding in the money, while I was also aggressively moving my stops, because the ATR is going to be huge. So there's no point for me risking all the way back up to 750 on all the ads that I had. So the average price was close to like 630 on all of them. And then I just started aggressively moving the stops. Once I felt like this was just below 6 and started doing the over under 6 mark, that is when I completely got flat and see what it wanted to do. The idea was, does it go back to 750? Because that's where it had traded in the pre-market as well. And that was the idea, that I'll just keep it like close to around that level, see how it goes back at like close to $7 as well. The second trade was actually on the long side, right after 11, which is when I actually tried to buy the base formations more like a bull flag, and it felt like the risk is fairly minimal. So the risk reward on that felt pretty comfortable. So I ended up scooping a lot of shares between 740 and like 725. Kept adding, and then the stop for all of that was like 695. And once I started adding as it started breaking out past 8, that's where I sort of moved my stop and just trailing it fairly quick. The idea for here to get out was I wanted to see what it does as we go above 8. It did actually hover around that area for a little bit and started doing the over under around 8, and which is where I ended up getting flat. So got a pop, comes back down, and I just ended up getting flat. I think it's fairly easier on the 1 minute chart that we'll also see a little later. And so between 12 and 12:30, the idea again was just keeping it on the long side, focused on the long side, seeing if it really wants to get parabolic. And that's where around 12 was my first short position in it. Ended up getting like a fairly quick wash into it, and then more like, we like to call it like an H pattern, where you get a quick wash and see if there's going to be any follow through as such. So I played the bounce as well, like a weak bounce, not really pulling back all the way, and then covered all the way into, I think it's in the 975s and 985 area. But again, it started just picking up speed. The volume wasn't really dying out. And as you can see, slightly past 12:45, the volume again starts coming in. So this stock is not done yet. Now coming into the big trade, that was sort of gradually building up, was it started getting parabolic, started going past 13, had like a couple of trades where I got top tick, and then kind of left it alone for a while, ends up in being like a big wick. So the moment I get like the upper 13s, that is when I felt much more comfortable building a short position, and then added a little bit, and then covered everything into the 12 level. Now 1350 was a huge offer. In fact, what started happening was 1350 was a big offer. So every time we go past close to 1350, now 1345 step in front of it. Now 1330s are starting to like sell in front of it. So the idea there was trying to step in front of it, keeping the stop above 1350, keeping it out of the mess. And once I started getting much more comfortable, I was just subsequently adding like a tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, 5, and 6. So I ended up getting to the max position all the way down there. I think close to 1285 was my last ad. But all the subsequent ads were like fairly distributed, and then just ended up catching the quick wash. And for the most part, that was the end of the trade. So that was the biggest trade. That was the focus. Big wash was what I was looking for. I had my covers all the way up to 10. So I only got actually filled on 2/3 of my cover, and I ended up actually manually killing the remaining 1/3 of the position that I had, and then just ended up getting flat on the name.
Nice. And what's important that I'm recognizing, that I think a lot of listeners are going to recognize, is this is something that you've traded before. You traded this, you know the name, you know how it acts. And you said at the very beginning, Christian, I appreciate you sharing this because it shows insight on your risk management. You already had a game plan of, I want to take very small size in the front side, take small losses if I need to take any losses. And then when I see my signals, or when I start to feel the trade, because over time, since you traded it all day, you start to kind of understand how it kind of has little breaks and fails. Yeah. So you can kind of play that momentum. And it looks like that's exactly what you did. And it's just a testament of, you started loading in when you felt confident, which is risk management 101, where a lot of people get confused. They take the same size for every trade. You're showing that if you size in appropriately, if you feel like you have an edge and you load up at the appropriate time, you can really end up having a nice, clean trade at the end of the day. And it seems like, I believe that you were saying this was a nice trade for you, especially at the end when you ended up loading up here, when you saw that major level at 1350, you had a reason. You had something to protect you. And that's something that a lot of people need to recognize. So
definitely something to lean on in terms of a level. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for sharing this trade. And I really appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here, Alex. Thanks for having me.